got slime like matted into the carpet in my house.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll work through this agenda, the January 4th agenda, and try to get all our questions answered. All right, first we've got approval of minutes. First, December 7th, 2020 work session. We have our city council regular meeting, December 7th, 2020. December 14th, 2020 work session, December 21st, 2020 work session, and then our city council meeting, December 21st, 2020. Any questions on minutes? Okay. All right, next we have public hearings. First one is ordinance number 21-4441, ZTA 246-20, amend Code of Decatur, Chapter 25, Section 25-2, and Article 10, or is that X? Yeah. Article 10, Section 25-197 and Section 25-198. Public hearing to be held on February 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. Joe or Matt?
Hi, yeah, this is Joseph from Planning. This is zoning text amendment 246-20, better known as the food truck ZTA. In essence, this would make it easier for food truck, mobile food vending units to operate in the city of Decatur. It would allow them to operate with much more freedom on private property, subject to certain requirements. And it would also set up a framework through which specified areas on public property could be designated as pre-approved mobile food vending sites. Some other minor changes to, prevent any inconsistency or contradictions and to keep definitions in conformity with those used by the health department, because as we found, some of our previous ones were a little bit different, so we wanted to sort of harmonize that. Are there any questions on this?
Hey, Joseph, I got one. This is Kyle. In there's reference to bathrooms, the requirement of bathrooms if a unit is in one place for 2 hours or more. Can you clarify, is that a health department issue?
Yes, sir, that is a health department requirement. Any food truck operating in one location for more than 2 hours is required to provide access to restroom facilities.
Okay, also there's a 48-hour notice that needs to be given. Is there any kind of exception that if somebody was not able to give 48 hours that they would be able to operate?
This 48-hour thing is just it's a guideline. This is how we're setting it up in the ordinance. I don't think I read it to mean that something couldn't be approved on less, but I do think that would be a reasonable amount of time, especially given that some of these might be requesting authorization for up to a year at a time. So if they're requesting that much,
right? So that's something that can be done yearly as opposed to every time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
With the 48-hour notice, would that be once a year, or is that just the process of getting approved through planning and other departments?
That's per approval. That doesn't necessarily mean it's each time. So under this ordinance, on private property, a food truck could be essentially pre-approved, say, to operate every Friday night, throughout the summer. And if they were to get that, that would fall under 25-197 subsection 2, the private property in a zone other than residential. They could request multiple approvals, approvals for multiple dates, and it would be the 48 hours sort of to do that scheduling. So if they wanted to, every Friday for the next 6 months, they could give us one request for administrative approval, and assuming everything was in the clear, that could be granted. But there is a need to check on the status of business license and health department letter of authorization, which is the reason that at least up to the point of that first approval, we did put in a little bit of a notice requirement with 48 hours.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. I just want to also say thank you to you, everybody in planning, as well as the planning commission for their work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Joseph? All right, next we have ordinance number 21-4442, approved pre-zoning 1368-20, public hearing to be held on February 1st, 2021. Joseph?
Yes, sir. This is a pre-zoning of about 1.635 acres. This is located at 2309 and 2313 Highway 20, and it's to pre-zone a parcel that you'll see later on in an annexation, and this would be pre-zoned to M1A. The neighboring parcel directly to the west of this has already been pre-zoned to M1A, and you'll also be seeing an annexation for that parcel tonight. So once, this pre-zoning and the two annexations tonight go through, presuming they go through, of course, that would make sort of one solid section where all of those parcels next to the existing racetrack gas station would be zoned M1A.
Okay, thanks, Joseph. Any questions? All right, next we have public hearings, ordinance number 20-4435, rezoning request 1366-20, a tract of land containing approximately 1.02 acres located east of Old River Road Southeast, currently zoned Ag 1, Agricultural District to R3, Single Family Residential District, public hearing to be held on January 4th, 2021. Joseph?
Yeah, this is, of course, will be the public hearing for that rezoning at 3002 Old River Road Southeast. It's currently zoned Ag 1, and it is now surrounded to the south and to the east with R3. So this rezoning would put that parcel in conformity with the surrounding R3 to the south and the east.
Okay, any questions? All right, resolutions. Resolution number 21-1, approve MUB expenditure of $155,000 for professional services for the Clark Springs Collector Phase 2 project.
Mayor, Council, my name is Jimmy Adams, Gas, Water, Wastewater Operations Manager with Decatur Utilities. This professional services agreement will be for the Clark Springs Collector Phase 2 project. This is to replace the sewer main in that area. This expenditure will allow us to enter into a professional services agreement with Q-Rite and McAnally Civil Engineers for the design, permitting, easement acquisition, and bid services to replace 6,400 feet of 12-inch existing sewer main and upsize it to 20-inch. We will also be replacing 2,400 feet of 8-inch and 12-inch and upsizing it to 14-inch sewer main. This project is part of our ongoing efforts to mitigate and minimize the sanitary sewer overflows in the wastewater system.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. Any questions?
Tell me where this is again, Jimmy.
This is along Limberley Drive, over to Home Depot, really, and it will go west across Bramble Road, and tie in on McTavish and Dunbar.
And the $155,000 is for the entire process, correct?
It's for the design and engineering.
For the design and engineering, okay,
It's
misunderstood.
probably gonna be,
I was about to say that's mighty small for that, but okay, go ahead.
the project itself will be much more.
I thought it would, okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks, Jimmy. Resolution number 21-2, approve MUB expenditure of $482,788 for Highway 20 interchange, water, wastewater, utility relocation betterment.
Later, this will be to fund the betterment portions of this project for the water and wastewater mains. We will be funding water betterment of this project is $423,433.34. Wastewater betterment is $59,354.05. The combined total betterment of $482,787.39.
Okay, any questions? Thanks, Jimmy. Resolution number 21-3, approved line item transfer build grant project. Herman?
Yeah, thank you. Basically what this does, since this is a capital project, the bill grant interchange, finance, and rightly so, thinks that it should be designated as a capital expenditure. So basically, it's a shifting of monies that covers legal fees from one account to the capital account. There is no increase in the overall budget. There is no increase in the department budget. So it's just a mere shifting of money to better reflect the expenditure as a capital expenditure.
Okay. Kyle, you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's just semantics, basically. We can't do anything capital-wise without approval
Right.
from y'all, so that's kind of
Okay, any questions? All right. Ordinance's first reading, ordinance number 21-4438, approve wastewater ordinance amending section 23-89 of the Code of Decatur, Alabama. Mr. Harden?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right in here.
Yep.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. Our plan I have to bring before you tonight is our wastewater system improvement plan upon recommendation from our Municipal Utilities Board. We've been talking a lot about this effort for several months and have settled on a plan that is going to be very aggressive in our effort to replace old aging sewer infrastructure over a 10-year period and try to eliminate the SSOs and reduce the SSOs that we have occurring in our system. Just to kind of recap a little bit of history, the way we got to this point, really over the last year, there's been a lot of study going on. In 2009, we did a system-wide hydraulic study of our sewer system, and that set out priorities for the work that has been going on the last decade or so. That primarily led to replacement of numerous lift stations, the Highway 31 South lift station, the Country Club, Stratford Road, Riverview, Mallard Fox Creek, and so a number of heavy capital investments in our sewer system to increase pumping capacity and storage capacity in those drainage basins. So in 2019 and 2020, we conducted another full system-wide study for two purposes. One was to verify that the results that we thought we had achieved through those previous investments was valid and that had worked, and to kind of set our new priorities going forward. Along with that, we conducted a cost of service study for our wastewater system to look at our variable cost, our fixed cost, and be sure that we are recovering our cost through our rate structure appropriately. We want to recover as much of our fixed cost as we can through a fixed charge and our variable cost through our variable volumetric rates. So as we looked at all of the information that was provided through those studies, we began finalizing our forward-looking plan for rehabbing our system. You may recall we had a public meeting a couple of months ago where we invited numerous people. It was prior to the election, so I think all candidates, current and future, were all invited. Many people came. And we talked about 3 different plans in that meeting, a 20-year plan, a 15, and a 10. With the, knowing that our current pace, our current activity level, is a 40-year plan. We're currently replacing about 25,000 feet of pipe a year. It'll take 40 years to get 1 million feet replaced, which is what we've got to get done. So the 20-year plan was a doubling of that pace, and as you can obviously see, the 10-year plan would be a quadrupling of that pace. The 10-year plan is what we're recommending, and there's a lot of competing interests in how we resolve this issue, but we have a number of things that we're trying to accomplish. We want to make sure we stay into compliance with our regulatory agencies that oversee the wastewater operation. Obviously, that's ADEM statewide. EPA has some oversight that we deal with them on a limited basis. The primary thing is that, you know, this is an issue that has been exacerbated in the past couple of years because we've had extremely wet winters. In fact, we just got some information from TVA in the past month that said that the winter we just had this past year was the wettest winter on record that they have, from records that they have. So obviously that heavy rains that we had in the past winter really brought this issue to light, and we saw how vulnerable we are to these heavy rainfall events and the SSOs occurring. We wanted to reduce the duration of this construction period. We don't want to have construction going on for multiple generations. This is a project that we think we can handle and tackle in a 10-year period, replacing about 100,000 feet a year. And so this is how we get settled on it. We're going to be implementing this. Our recommendation is to implement this over a 3-year period to try to keep it affordable for citizens, knowing that this is certainly not something that was being talked about, you know, a year ago. And then I'll talk a little bit about this more as we get into it. The financing that we're planning to use is going to mitigate future rate increases. When we met in our public meeting a few months ago, the only thing we were talking about at that time for financing was tax-exempt bonds. And that type of financing has some limitations on it for the amount of money you can borrow and the time frame that you have to spend it. Since that time, we've discovered some options for taxable bonds, and because of the favorable interest rate environment, there's almost no difference between taxable and tax-exempt right now. The benefit of those taxable bonds is that we can borrow all of the money we need for this project over the 10-year period, and not have to go back to the market at a period of time in the future when we would expect rates to be much higher. So I've talked a little bit about the fact that we plan to cover 100,000 feet a year. It's going to also fund numerous projects that came out of the hydraulic study, primarily dealing with capacity. Upsizing large collector pipes that are crossing the city to get water from outer lying areas all the way into the plant. The project Jimmy just talked about is one just like what we're talking about. That was a project we were already planning to do, but there's numerous other projects in our plan just like that, where we'll be upsizing collector lines to add capacity and storage into the system. And then we've got a couple of additional pump station projects. The Lift Station 7, which is what we call the Pine Station, will be replaced, and then we'll be doing some upgrades in our Lift Station 5, which is on 14th Street. So I haven't listed every detailed project. Those will all come to the council at some point in time over this project period. The financing, as I mentioned, we recently did some refinancing of some old water and wastewater debt, and combined all of that old debt under one indenture that improved our credit ratings, and we're in a good credit position in order to be able to do this borrow now. As I mentioned, for the wastewater system, the borrow that we anticipate is $165 million. We're gonna be taking advantage of what's called a wrap amortization, which simply means the debt service over this 30-year life of this loan will be backloaded a little bit. We'll be paying lower payments in the front end while we've got current debt still on our books. As that debt pays off, we'll have higher payments so that over the life of that debt service, our loans payments will be very stable. And really the use of the taxable bonds, as I mentioned earlier, really reduces the risk of us having to go back to the market in 6 or 7 years when interest rates could be 4 or 5%. We obviously know they can't go anywhere but up at this point. So we really feel like it reduces the risk of future increases. The bill impact that we will see from this, that our customers will see, I've got some slides in your paperwork there. A typical customer today, and the way I say it, when I say a typical residential customer, we categorize that for an electric customer of 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, for gas 60 CCF, and then 4,125 gallons of water, which also determines the sewer bill. Today, that customer pays $195 a month for a monthly bill like that. This would increase that bill by $10, and there's two things happening there. It's a $12 increase in the first year on the sewer bill, but also a $2 decrease on the electric bill from a credit that we pass along from TVA. And then in the second and third year on the sewer bill, there would be an additional $6 in the second year and $4 in the third year. The last slide that I have in that package is something you've probably become familiar with. We've been very fortunate to have the lowest utility bill in the state for a long time. Really, Decatur and Huntsville are neck and neck in that area because of all the growth that's happened over the years from our industrial and large customers. Even with these increases, we'll still be the number 2 lowest bill in the state after the third year. It's something that, we don't want to place an undue emphasis on being the cheapest, but we still want to be assured that our services are affordable to our customers, our citizens. So I've covered a fair amount of the details. I'll be glad to take questions that you have and go from there.
So, Ray, this is a 30-year borrow, right, for a 10-year project. After this loan is paid off, what do we think the chances are of the sewer rates decreasing? I mean, I know it's hard to look into
It's 30 years.
30 years out.
Typically, and Steve will tell you, typically we take advantage of 20-year debt because we want to be as conservative as we can. We went to a 30-year term on this because of the affordability issue and making sure we could fund it. But that's something that someone else is going to have to determine long after we're all gone. But this is a significant increase to fund a specific project, and I can't anticipate what kind of cost would be in place 30 years from now, but you would certainly expect costs to be able to be reduced. But we're talking about adding assets to our system that have a 50 to 60 year life. And so you would expect there would be some time to rebuild reserves and be in a position to fund capital projects after that.
So folks' bills are going to be an additional $22 a month after the 3-year period for 30 years?
That's correct. It's a 30-year debt. And we're talking primarily
20 or
about
22? It's 20. You're saying 20, aren't you?
Well, the sewer bill itself is going up $22, but the $2 reduction is on the power side. So the total bill impact is $20.
I just wanted the numbers right.
That's correct. So you're right about that.
I've had several people email and ask, is there, why can't you base it on usage? You know, we've got, well, who's to say that a apartment is, you know, that it should be cheaper than a 3-bedroom house? Right. This is stuff, you know,
Yeah.
It's lots of questions, and some people don't understand it, so maybe if you could explain it a little bit, it would.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to our cost of service analysis that we did. But in general, when we go to the credit rating agencies to get evaluated for our credit worthiness and then go to the bond market, we need to be able to determine and positively show that we have a cash flow that can pay back that loan. We want to get a good interest rate, and the credit rating is going to be very important. The fixed charge, this new debt is going to be a fixed cost for us, and there's no way we can save our way out of it. It's a fixed charge, just like a mortgage, and so we need to recover that through a fixed component of our rate schedule. The other piece of it is that the rating agency is going to be very wary of trying to increase the volumetric piece enough, knowing that that's going to overly burden the high users, typically our large industries, who are much easier to leave our city than a large population of residential or small commercial customers. We have the cost of service study really goes through the analysis of what fixed charge is justifiable based on our cost. And so we're going from $8 to $30 over a 3-year period. The cost of service study really says that we can justify, was it 32 or 33? $33. So we're staying short of what the cost of service study says we should be justifying. But that's really what we're talking about. And Councilman Pepper, what I was going to say a while ago is we're primarily talking about the 5/8 meter when we talk about these residential customers. But this is impacting the access fees for all meter sizes, which is really all customer sizes. And so every customer class is paying a larger share and contributing towards the cost of this.
So, out of curiosity, and you said after the three-year phase, and it's going to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the rate increase, and you said we'd be number 2, still the lowest in the state. How do I word this? Basically, what I'm trying to say is there any other options besides a rate increase that high? Is there an option to lower the increase by any chance? Is there any other options out there to fix the solution? Because I don't have kids yet, but I have a 4-year-old niece, and it's kind of like Mr. Pike said earlier, he'd like for his daughter not to have to ride down the road in a bicycle and see feces going down the road, and I'd like for my 4-year-old niece to be able to learn how to ride a bicycle and not have to, ride down the neighborhood across the street and not see feces floating down the street. And I think it's very important that we do get it fixed, but I'm just curious to know if there is any other options.
The other options are to spread it out over a longer period of time. We say we do it over 15 or 20 years. We evaluated those options and felt like this was the best solution for our city to attack this as aggressively as we could possibly manage it, and get this done as quickly as reasonable. You may recall we did look at a 5-year plan, but the engineering and design work associated with some of these projects couldn't be done within that period of time, and it was just sort of impractical to think about replacing 200,000 feet a year over a 5-year period. But so really slowing down the pace is the only thing I see that could reduce the cost, because it would reduce,
How could it reduce the cost if you're borrowing all the money?
Yeah, it really would not reduce the cost. It would really just allow us to stop. We would still be borrowing all that money up front, and so you'd still have the same debt load going forward. I'm still thinking back to when we were looking at multiple borrows over longer periods of time, but in this case, we're talking about borrowing all the project funds up front. So whether you spend it in 7 years or 12 years or 15, it's going to cost the same.
That's the issue, if we can slow it down, but the problem is, if you borrow this money, the rate increase is gonna be the same. If you lower your increases, you can only borrow less, which would require us to borrow additional funds later at a much higher cost, most likely. That's why this is our recommendation. In the long run, it would cost us more money and the rate would be higher if we tried to not spread it over just a shorter period of time.
Speaking of financing options, and I'm sure y'all have, but have y'all exhausted every grant effort there is? Or is it because this is considered maintenance, it's not eligible for a grant?
DU is not eligible for grants in general. We've not been able to be successful at we've gotten some energy grants occasionally on the electric side, but Gary can tell you a little bit about our history in applying for grants. And our feedback has always been that because we're not looking at like a CDBG grant that's gonna look at a small portion of the community. It's evaluated based on the whole city. And they just tell us we're not financially in bad enough shape where we can qualify for those things.
Shame on you.
I do just want to clarify, and we keep saying after these increases, we'd be the second. Look, that's assuming no one else increases their rates.
Well, that's right, and we've researched all of our neighboring communities. We know that there are cities that are doing 3% rate increases every year to keep up with those costs going up. That's based on today's cost, you're right. I mean, so 3 years from now, we may end up still being the lowest, but that's something we wouldn't know until we got there.
It's a conservative approach.
Right.
I think too, the original plan you guys kind of showed when we were looking at tax exempt bonds was the advantage, I would say, to that is if you did 5 year, you were gonna have to borrow 5 years at a time.
Right.
If you did that and you did 5 years and we kind of looked at the worst sections first, which I think is the plan, and that maybe fixed a lot of the issue. You don't have to continue to do that project if we think that fixed the issue. The downside of that is if it doesn't work, you're then borrowing at much higher rates and you're passing that cost along to the citizens at a much higher pace. Whereas borrowing all the money up front at the lowest rates that we've ever seen has its advantage too. But
I would say, we're hopeful that the first 5 years of this project will see a lot of benefit because we're going to be attacking it. But we know we have about 800,000 feet of clay pipe in our system. It's all got to come out because it's all 40 years old or more, and it's going to be 50 by the end of this project if we don't do something about it. It's very susceptible to root intrusion and brittle pipe, and so that pipe's got to be retired and replaced at some point. And this project, and that's the pipe that is the most susceptible to causing these kind of issues. So,
how long has this issue been going on, out of curiosity, before we even brought up trying to attack it?
well, I mean, DU has been dealing with SSOs for multiple decades. I mean, we've dealt with hotspots, and like I mentioned in the 2009 timeframe, we did a system-wide study that led us to replace several lift stations. Really, all cities, all sewer systems have SSOs. This is not a Decatur issue, but this is something that's somewhat unprecedented in saying we're going to attack this and get it behind us, and try to get all this clay pipe out of the ground that's causing these issues. One thing I'll caution you about, we expect to see dramatic improvement, and I've used this terminology before, but over the course of a year, we're going to be investing this money to upgrade our infrastructure to deal with problems that happen on about 5 or 6 days a year with the heavy rains. You've heard the terminology, you don't build the church for Easter Sunday, but in this case, we've got to build the church for Easter Sunday because we've got to be able to deal with those heaviest rains and contain all that wastewater inside the system without it being overcome. And so that's really what we've got to get done, is to get all that pipe replaced.
So do you guys have like a plan set out of where you're gonna start and where you're hoping to end in the 10-year period?
And,
Is it gonna be a hit or miss area? How do y'all decide?
let me add to that. You know, we know the environmental impact. We've seen the ADM EPA stuff. Are those issues being addressed first prior to, I assume you have a plan like he's referring to?
Yes to both of you. We are in the process of finalizing an order with ADM now that's going to provide some thresholds, and I guess I'm trying to, what's the right word? The milestones, that's the word I'm looking. Milestones annually and every 6 months that we'll be reporting to them on. But the SSES, the hydraulic study that we did will drive our priorities. We're gonna be focusing on the areas where we know we have the worst issues first and working off of that kind of a list. Now, it won't be street here and street there. Once we know we're working in an area, it's gonna be more neighborhood complete basis. But, right now, we have contract with a company now to do 25,000 feet for this year already. And, assuming if this gets passed and we go to the bond market in early spring, we'll be going back out to bid several other projects to get up to that 100,000 feet a year, going forward.
One would assume if this plan passes, this would satisfy ADM's requirement of where they want us to be.
Yes.
So on the flip side, what happens if it doesn't pass and we maintain the 40-year plan?
We've not really contemplated that. We need to do this. We could do a lesser replacement plan just to satisfy ADM, but that problem would come back with ADM because SSOs would continue to be a problem. We think that ADM's going to be very pleased with our approach. In fact, we've shared with them that what our approach is going to be pending the council's decision. And I think that they're going to be very satisfied with our approach with this.
And we've received fines in the past?
We have.
Do we have an amount? A ballpark number that, even in the last 2 years?
In 2008, there was an order, we paid $57,000. Yeah. And that was associated with that order.
We want to keep this at the state level.
Right.
You don't want this to go to the federal level.
So we paid $57,000 in fines because we're not in compliance with ADM over this issue?
That was in 2008.
2008.
Yes, sir. And now there was an order in place there that we got in compliance with, and we were released from that order in 2013, or 2012, in that time frame. So, the way ADM views compliance is every day you don't have an SSO, you're in compliance. And the day that you have one, you're out of compliance. It's a black or white, you're either in or out, one or the other,
Do you see any, obviously this is caused by rainwater, stormwater getting into the sewer.
Correct.
And when that can't happen anymore, which is a good thing for what we're talking about, are there any issues that could arise with, and I guess it's probably more of a question for our engineering department, but when that stormwater that we've had that going on forever and we're saying that's gonna go away, could that cause some issues with our stormwater?
That's not something we've really analyzed. Mr. Pruitt would be better to speak to that. I would say that the city will have to take a look at some kind of a long-range plan for the storm sewer system to see what its capabilities are to deal with additional runoff that may not have made it into the sanitary sewer because of the improvements we're making. But I don't know that it would be something that would be dramatically different than what's going on today.
Go ahead.
So when y'all go through the neighborhoods and y'all tear up the roads and all that, I'm guessing roads are gonna have to be torn up to get to the pipes. What are we gonna do after the roads are torn up and the pipes are fixed? Are we planning on paving the road in behind it? I mean, what's the plan there?
Well, from our point of view, this is gonna be done with various different kinds of construction. But the bulk of this construction is what's called pipe bursting. And so you don't tear up the entire length of the pipeline. It's at each service line wherever every house connects. But there's a paving standard that the city and DU worked out a while back that we follow that outlines, depending on the type of cut that we have, what type of patch needs to go back. But obviously, one of the things we would do is coordinate with the city engineer every quarter, as much as we needed to be sure that if the city's got paving projects that they really need to do, can we be flexible enough to move our work to get ahead of that? I think those kinds of decisions will have to be made on the fly over the course of this project.
I mean, it'd be nice to pave it afterwards, because I've seen like on Danville Road, you had to do something not that long ago, and finally they paved it, but after they got done, they patched each little area. When you go down Danville Road going toward Mount Ira, you were jumping up and down going down the road, so I think it'd be really nice that after you guys got done, that we were eligible to pave the road. I'm guessing that would be a plan that we would have to come up with, again, Carl or somebody like that from the engineering department, also funding for it, I'm guessing, so I'm guessing it's not gonna be included in the
I mean,
20 rating.
like, as I said, the paving standards, there are occasions where we would pave a full lane width for a period of distance, but generally, those are gonna be patches that meet that paving standard. And by a lot of times, the sewer mains are not in the street, they're in the alleys, or they're in other areas where paving is not involved. Certainly, if there's a major construction where you're open cutting down a road, that's a different story, and they would replace the entire lane that's disturbed there.
Those paving patch replacements after the projects are completed, those are factored into the contract with these contractors.
Okay.
They're responsible for doing that to meet the standard that Bray's talking about, that you and the city work together on to build.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner, I know Carl, I'm sure would like to see it, is what that construction plan looks like. I mean, I think that's incredibly important, because I think this year budgeted $1.2 million for paving. We can't pave $1 million worth of roads and then it's torn up in a year.
Yeah.
And we really gotta know where these spots are that are gonna have to be, dug up.
And those communications do happen now.
Yeah.
They have been happening. And we can work together, we, get notification from Carl that these are the streets we're gonna be paving this year. And any work that we know of that we have to do, we try to get ahead of that.
Right.
But what none of us can forget is that there are utilities under a lot of streets.
Yeah.
So something that's unknown today could go wrong 3 years from now on a street that was paved 2 years ago, and nobody knew that was gonna happen, so we have to make that repair or maintain that utility.
Yeah.
Yes, where we can work together, we do.
Right, absolutely, but for this plan, we should know where those are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, where those large areas are, and then prior paving, that's one of the big things for me is the communication and cooperation, to try to prevent those issues if we can. And then another question, if I remember right, it was discussed in the 5-year plan, was the availability of contractors. We don't foresee any issues with contractors being available over a 10-year plan, do we? I mean, that's a lot.
Right now, we don't. We have 3 contractors at least who already have done this kind of work for us, and we know that by bidding out larger quantities, that's gonna attract some larger regional firms that would come in. And we pre-qualify firms to do work for us, and we wanna be sure that they're gonna do the kind of work we expect, and we wanna have a little experience with them. So, vetting new people, even though we're gonna be a large firm out of Memphis or somewhere, we want to be sure that they understand our expectations, and sometimes we like to have them do a smaller project for us before we hand them a $15 million project for a year.
So are we only gonna hire one contractor to do the entire thing, or is this gonna be like you're gonna get this area, you're gonna get this area, how is that gonna work?
We anticipate annual bids for this kind of project. There is, we've done a lot of different kinds of ways to do this. There are times where we have done a 2-year contract with a 1-year option to extend, or a 1-year contract with 1-year options to extend. We've not gone through the planning of that type of detail yet, but I would anticipate multiple different contractors working over the course of the 10 years to do
So,
this work.
an annual bid, like for per 100,000 feet, you guys are gonna do a bid? So every year?
Generally, we would do that right.
Well, thank you.
And it's specifically related to the locations you talked about. When we bid this kind of work, we don't tell them that it's gonna be on Oak Street and Vine Street. We talk about, we're gonna be replacing X amount of footage of 8-inch pipe, and they'll go where we need them to go. And, so there's flexibility built into those contracts that allow us to move to where we need to go.
All right, any other questions for Ray?
I appreciate you giving us a presentation. I think it was great. I learned something
Thank you.
today.
Yep.
I'm available if you have any questions, just give me a call.
We'll follow
Thanks,
up.
Ray.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have ordinance number 21-4439, approve annexation 362-20. Joseph?
Yeah, so this is back to the racetrack property that we were looking at earlier with the pre-zoning. This is for the property that has already been pre-zoned. This is 1.67 acres, and this is to the east and south of the existing racetrack gas station at the intersection of Highway 20 and Beltline Road. This is already, as I said before, it's already pre-zoned from 1A. And this is to accommodate a site plan we've received for expansion and addition of some diesel pumps and additional access drives to the existing gas station at that location.
Okay. Is the next one the same?
Yes, the next one is just the parcel immediately to the east of that one. Those two parcels together, once they would, presumably a condition that was put on the site plan was to consolidate them. So presumably if they were to be approved for annexation and both pre-zoning were in place, they would be all consolidated into one parcel, but they're all contiguous along the Highway 20 frontage of that larger tract.
Okay. Any questions for Joseph? All right, next we have board appointments. Appoint Mrs. Rebecca Poole Burns, Historic Preservation Commission, with term expiring March 19th, 2021. Herman, anything on that, or Stephanie?
Well, that'd really be, that is Tab.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, all right. We interviewed 2 candidates, and Ms. Poole was the one that we had chose to appoint at this time. Caroline Swope joined me in the interview.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thanks, Mayor. Kyle, I had a note. You had something?
Evening, council. You guys are all aware that we've been working with Fraser Lanier and our bond counsel over the past few months for we're refunding our 2011 GO warrants and our 2012 warrants. So initially we were expecting to receive a $750,000 net savings. And so working with Johnny, we were diligent with our preparations with meeting with Moody's and whatnot. So when the election occurred, the federal election occurred, the savings went down to about $300,000. So because we were kind of in a good spot, we waited, and we got fortunate last week. We were part of the only bond issuance that occurred in the state of Alabama. Typically, the last 2 weeks, not a lot of activity happens. And our average coupon rate went from 3.18 to 1.27, and we afforded the city $1,075,000 in debt service savings. So to clarify, those two bonds that were refunded, they're split amongst several funds. So the sewer fund will receive, these are estimates, 258,000 of that savings. Room occupancy, 105,000, and lastly, the general fund, $711,000. So this is where we decided to go with the net savings, the lump sum payment. The other option was spreading it over the life of the debt. There really wasn't a lot of bang for your buck. So on the closing date, which is January 26th, we're going to receive the full 1.075 million, and no debt service payments will change. And this basically maximizes our financial position with, playing with some debt service. So with all that saying, I come today to ask that we get the ordinance added to the January 4th meeting. And we're looking for immediate consideration, just to kind of expedite the process, because the closing is the 26th.
Okay. All right, any questions for Kyle? Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.
All right, anything else from directors? Anything from the mayor?
Yes, Council President, I sent the council an email last night regarding some office furniture and an office space for our communications specialist. And did everyone have an opportunity to look at the email that I sent?
I think so.
Okay. Well, are there any questions?
A portion of that was going to be covered with heritage funds. Is that correct, Kyle?
What was the dollar amount? I don't have it in front of me.
11,000.
It's $11,013.31. And Kyle helped me out this morning. The funding source is the walls for the office will come from the Heritage, is recommended that they come from the Heritage Fund. And then the furniture, which would be a desk and a chair, is recommended to come from the unassigned fund balance.
Okay. Any questions? I don't think we have any questions, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else from council? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Ray. Let's see if it's it.